Oh, well, that was kind of weak. Yes. Holy cow. How many people do not get a newsletter and would like one? Okay, there's 1, 2, 3. There's 3 on there. 4. But please, before you leave today, Karen in this wonderful red shirt or jacket in the back, she'll take down your name and your email address, and we'll make sure you get on that newsletter. And so we have the website, we have the newsletter, and then we have a mid-month newsletter that kind of helps remind us the next steps and gives interesting bits of news. So we're going to move right into a couple of abbreviated open mic because we want to move quickly to our guest speaker. And so Jack, who always refuses to use a mic, Jack Hamilton is in the back. He's got a book that is a must-read book for conservatives. Jack, why don't you just say something brief about the book?
Yes, $15. Come, I'll sign it.
Always, and that's his subtle moment. I just want you to know. Okay. So it is a must-read book, though, and so I encourage you to get it. We have another fellow that's going to come and promote a book, and he'll come right up and talk about it real quick.
Thank you. I'm William Yale. I'm here because people have asked for more copies of this book. Beethoven wrote a sonata, Marcia Funebres sulla morte di un eroe, upon hearing that Napoleon Bonaparte had declared himself Emperor of Europe and no longer was a champion of the common man. Zero Hedge, 12 April 2017, said Donald Trump's transformation into a mainstream politician now appears complete. Steve Munchin, Donald Trump's campaign finance advisor, was appointed Secretary of the Treasury and opposed any audit of the Federal Reserve Bank. Munchin is a member of the Goldman Sachs banking cartel. Donald Trump has reversed his pre-election promise and will weaken the U.S. dollar, stating, "I think our dollar is getting too strong. I do like low-interest policy." He also is considering to renominate Janet Yellen after attacking her during his campaign to the chair of Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Janet Yellen is a member of the Bank of International Settlements. President Johnson, Lincoln, Kennedy tried to stop this family of bankers by printing non-Rothschild U.S. dollars, and only Andrew Jackson survived because both assassins' pistols misfired. This book, FedEd, out in 2016, second edition, 2017, is not about Donald Trump. It's a summary of some 50 books about the overwhelming power of the Swiss bank international settlements over the U.S. presidents and the U.S. economy. This banker's bank is owned and manipulated of the Federal Reserve Bank, of more than 90% of our mainstream media, as well as our educational system. People who vote should realize this is the immense problem behind the decline of America as a country, and not so much the lesser problems such as which public restrooms to use or supporting inaccessible rhino politicians. $12.50, Amazon $12.50 plus $3 shipping. Thank you.
And I'm happy to announce also in the back of the room, Sandy Dahlquist, formerly Dahlquist Jewelers, has some of the most extraordinary, elegant, fantastic. You can't get it anywhere outside of this room, right? Tonight anyway. So swing by and look at the new bling on the table and wear it proudly wherever you go, especially here. Especially the little Kitsap Patriots Tea Party pins, right? They're a great social introduction at any place you go because you have to explain what it means, and it gives a good conversation starter. Okay, any other real quick, important open mic announcement? Yes. Oh, Mr. Marcus, come on up. You don't get to be the only one that breaks the rules and says that, except Jack. Jack.
Folks, again, I'm Marcus Carter from Kitsap right from Boulder Club. This is South Kitsap, and y'all remember what the 4 boxes of liberty are? Anybody remember what those were? You know, first there's the soapbox, right? You stand on a soapbox. The second is what? The ballot box. All right. If it doesn't work there, what's the next one? The jury box. If that doesn't work, what else is left? The garbage box. Kitsap Rifle Revolver Club was just found guilty and shut down permanently. The second lawsuit, we were denied discovery. Couldn't ask any questions. We were denied an evidentiary hearing. They said that we negotiated on this permit in good faith, in bad faith. That's a lie. We wanted to get it in front of the judge and bring evidence up, bring people up to testify. He denied us an evidentiary hearing. So no discovery, no evidentiary hearing, and no trial. Guilty, done. Somebody can sue you, bring all sorts of accusations, and you never get to have your jury box. Folks, it has gotten that bad. Be watching Wednesday night up at the club. There is the 242nd anniversary of the battles of Lexington and Concord. We invite you to come up. It's a good time to learn a little history. So watch these elections, folks. Judge seats are coming up. We got commissioners here in another year, 2018, and a new prosecutor, etc. All those things are coming up. Time is running very, very short. If you don't think that's serious, you ain't paying attention.
What's your next move?
Spent all day today writing a legal brief. Oh, and the administrative appeal. Okay, we appealed the fact that they denied our permit. So we appealed that. We said, okay, we want discovery. We sent interrogatories. We need some questions answered. Who are your experts? Who's going to testify? How did they, why did they come to the conclusions they came to? Guess what? We were just informed. Quashed. No discovery. No answering of questions. And that's in the administrative appeal because they did deny our permit, by the way. This is far from over. This is far from over. World War II was not won on D-Day. But it was a very important step. And there were a lot of things that still needed to fall into place. That's what's happening here. The big one is we need you guys involved. Again, sorry to take so much.
Who's doing this?
Pardon me?
Who's doing this?
Are you live in Kitsap County?
I do.
You are. You are.
All right.
So we're not
Our
going
tax
to.
dollars because the county commissioners are doing it in your name. So talk to them.
Yeah, we're not going to get wrapped. That's not the point of tonight's meeting. Is that we call it 2-minute open mic. 2-minute open mic.
Sorry, Johnny.
But we will make it a point to bring a good presentation that focuses on that suit. Yes, sir.
3 p.m. to 7 p.m. Celebration out of the range.
3 p.m. 7 p.m. celebration out at the range.
On the website.
Okay, and Marcus is going to be here at the end, so you can talk to him all you want after the meeting. Okay, now tonight we're going to try our Q&A session just a little bit different. We're going to do it a little bit like a town hall, because sometimes we miss folks in the audience that want to ask a question, and we regret that, and we have trouble keeping track of the time. So after the presentation tonight, we're going to do a quick segue. I'll come up here, turn on the mic, and if you want to ask a question, we'll do it just like a town hall. You come up, stand in line, tell people who you are, and ask a question. Now, the trick of this is, as you've noticed, you have to ask a question. This is not 2 minutes to pontificate on what you think. This is to ask a question, and then we can all get a good answer. Is that fair? Okay. I didn't hear any nays, so we're gonna chalk that up to being fair. All right. Now we're gonna move right into our presentation for the night. Please give a good round of applause to a courageous organization, a courageous young man. And in fact, I'm going to do something a little different. Will all the I-1552 volunteers just come forward real quick? Including our guest speaker, Joseph Backholm. Give him a round of applause. And we can call up all the volunteers. There we go. There's a few more. Paige, you want to come up? I want you to see who the warriors are for this initiative. And trust me, getting out, getting harassed, getting belittled, getting yelled at, being treated in demeaned and dismissive ways is not easy in the best of circumstances. But in this fight, these, among many others, have been the warriors in the field. And I just want to thank you personally on behalf of the Kitsap Patriots Tea Party for fighting so hard. We're here behind you as much as we possibly can. And give them a round of applause, please. And if you want to volunteer and join them, there's a table right over here. If you haven't filled out the petition, there's a table right over here. Now we've taken up enough of Joseph's time. Thank you for being here. You're on, John.
Good evening. And I'm thankful to be here, and I feel a bit of an obligation to segue from the comment about the initiative. Most of our conversation tonight is not about that, but that it is happening, and I hope you know that it is happening. And with initiatives in general, for those of us who have lived in Washington State for a while, we see initiatives on the ballot all the time. And so, what most people don't understand, though, is that 95% or more of the time when there's an initiative on the ballot, it's because somebody has a financial interest in the issue, which means some lobby group or some industry writes a check for over $1 million, which goes to signature gathering firms, who go out and gather the signatures and do the work necessary to put an initiative on the ballot. When it comes to people's privacy and security, nobody has a financial interest in it. Which means the only way this is going to get on the ballot is if we all take a vested interest in this. That being said, if one of you wants to write a check for $1 million and we can pay a signature gathering firm, we're happy to do it that way. That's the easy way for sure. And so if somebody wants to solve it, let's do that. And then we can all just forget about it. But unless that happens, we all need to take an investment in this, because as the law currently stands right now, it is perfectly legal for grown men to take their clothes off in front of girls in a locker room, and boys get to go into the girls' locker room at school by declaring themselves to be female. And it is something that I think we all are opposed to, but we're all frustrated by what we've seen happen in the culture. And so much of that has happened because it's like, oh, well, that's too bad, but we don't have the gumption and we don't put in the effort to do something about it. And on this case, if we get this on the ballot, we're going to win, even in Washington, because this is not a Republican-Democrat issue, conservative-liberal issue. This is a very common-sense issue for most of the state. We will win. The hard work here is getting it on the ballot. And you just saw some of the heroes locally who are doing the tough work and getting involved. But there's a table back there, and I told Rebecca to brought her mace again. And if you try to leave without a petition, you might not like what happens. So that's just my warning. Make sure you pick one up on the way out. So that's that. That's my commercial for this, for the initiative a little bit. We're going to have a conversation tonight about something that we've called the gender revolution, why everything seems backwards, and what it means for education. Now this is an interesting subject for most of us, and kind of the preamble that I want to give as we get going is I don't really consider myself an expert in what I'm about to talk about, and that's because I don't know anybody who really is, because this is kind of a very new thing. And it's been months that anybody has really been wrestling with this idea of whether your biology is connected to your gender in any serious way, because this was so obvious, most of us hadn't spent any time thinking about it, and suddenly here we are, it's like a national obsession. And so what I hope to do tonight is to provide some kind of a framework so that, not that you're going to like change your perspective on what gender is necessarily, but I do hope that we, from one perspective, can develop a bit of an understanding and begin to understand and interpret the terms. When people are talking about something that seems so foreign to us, are they crazy? No, they're not crazy most of the time. They're not crazy, but there's a degree that they think there's logic behind this, and I want to help us kind of understand what are we dealing with and why. So that's the purpose of this. I do not intend this to be the final word on the subject, and there's much that could be said before and after this, but I hope we're going to provide some framework, and we really are going to peel back the curtain a little bit on what's happening in public education, specifically on this, because for those of us who are parents and grandparents and people that we care are in the public schools, I think what you're going to learn tonight, I hope will scare you, but scare you in a way that will drive you to action as well. So that's the purpose of this conversation this evening. Why everything seems backwards and what it means for education. Now, very quickly, how many of you would say you know little to nothing about the Family Policy Institute of Washington, which is the organization I work for? Is that true? Okay, and that's to be expected, I think, a little bit. So I'm going to spend a moment talking about this. And we are a public policy organization. We are part of a network. There are 42 organizations like ours around the country. And we are independently governed, run, financed, but we're in a relationship because we work on similar issues. We work on marriage, life, religious freedom, parental rights issues. And ultimately, we think that if families are strong, the culture is strong. And there are things that can be done in public policy to incentivize that, and there are things that can be done to disincentivize that. At the highest level at the end of the year, when we determine whether we have fulfilled the purpose for which we exist, we ask ourselves the following questions. Have we influenced policy, which means have we helped good things become law, and have we helped bad things not become law? And secondly, have we helped people who share our perspective and our worldview get into positions of influence so that they can move the ball in the right direction when it comes to what public policy is? So those are the very high-level questions that we ask to determine, are we being effective? Now, how do we do that? And what you see here represented, our wheel that we talk about in-house, these are our 5 core capacities. These are the things that we believe we need to be able to do well in order to accomplish the purpose for which we exist. And the first I want to talk about here is this dynamic citizen network. This is the community of people around the state who agree with us, who share our perspective, who want the same outcomes that we do. I worked in the legislature for the 3 years before I came to this job 8.5 years ago. And what I learned there is the legislature is not a truth-seeking environment. You guys probably know this, but it doesn't matter who has the best argument in the legislature. What matters is how many people are making that argument. And the squeaky wheel does get the grease. And so we need to be the squeaky wheel in a really compassionate, professional, kind, gracious way. We need to be the squeaky wheel. So we are trying to organize people who are frustrated, who feel powerless to do anything about it, and connect us with each other so that we can provide resources, we can provide answers and information that they don't otherwise have, which allows them and us and each of you and me to all make a difference in a way we couldn't previously. And it really is the size of the network that makes all the difference in the world when it comes to influencing public policy. So that is really the foundation of what we're trying to do. We're also trying to do create really good media and communications, which is the size of the megaphone, how we're talking to people, the various forms in which we're talking to people, and the quality of those communications. We're always trying to do better at that. Relationships with policymakers. That's important to us. This is this is the 501c3 vernacular for lobbying, mostly. And this is, do you know what's going on inside the legislature? Do you have the ability to influence what they're doing? Do you know the people? Do they know you? Can you talk to them? Can you get intelligence? The way this all works together, we find out something that's going on in the legislature, we give it to our communications team, who then sends it to you, and then when you email or phone, make a phone call or make a personal visit with your legislator, because of what you've received from us, that's how legislators start to care about us. Otherwise, we're just a guy with an opinion. But if they know that we're talking to 4,000 voters in their district, they care about what we think, whether they like us or not, whether they agree with us or not. So that's why all of these independent parts are so important. Policy and research is really kind of the very typical think tank work that everybody thinks think tanks do, which is research and writing and talking memos and white papers and those sorts of things. And we do some of that. That the supermajority of what we do, but certainly understanding what you're saying and why you're saying it and having the research is an important part of public policy so you can actually know and defend your position. And then finally, build up together, and why the network is so important is that the only way your ideas come to matter in the legislature is if you have the ability to influence people's elections. And that is the brass tacks of the legislature and of public policy. And so we want to have enough of us organized in an effective enough way so that people who share our worldview know on the ballot, and we can provide the information, who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, so that they can vote in a way that is consistent with their value system, and we can do that together. And in doing so, we can make sure that we are having people who share our perspective more often than not in positions of influence. And that also, getting people to run is part of that as well. So these are our 5 core capacities that we do as an organization, and basically we're trying to make truth politically relevant in the legislative environment. So that's who we are, and that's what we're doing at the very highest level. And tonight is just one piece of this puzzle that we're trying to build. But what we're here to talk about today, and to drill down to a much more local level, why are we arguing about bathrooms? This is I think the question a lot of us have, whether we've said it this way, we've probably thought it. This seems like one of the dumbest conversations in the world. Who cares where people go to the bathroom? And I think all of us would probably raise our hands and say, not me. But of course, this has really, it's referred to as the bathroom debate. We actually try to avoid that because we don't think it really has anything to do with bathrooms. But why are we having this conversation so suddenly around the country? And in order to answer this question, I think we need to back up a little bit, and we need to talk about what's happened in the country, not in the last 16 months, but in the last 60 years or so. And we have experienced something that a British theologian by the name of Theo Hobson refers to as a moral revolution. And he defined 3 components of a moral revolution. The first, that which was once celebrated is now condemned. The second, that which was once condemned is now celebrated. And third, those who refuse to celebrate are also condemned. Those are the 3 components. Now, regardless of how you feel about the underlying issue, whether you're supportive of it or concerned by it, we have experienced a moral revolution. That which was once celebrated is now condemned. That which was once condemned is now celebrated. Literally, we throw parades, and there's a day all over the country. And those who refuse to celebrate are also condemned. And we've seen the stories about the small businesses who don't want to celebrate a particular event, and they literally have been shut down by various levels of government. We have experienced a moral revolution in the country. Now, I show you this picture. This is from June 26, 2015. It's, of course, the White House on the day that the Supreme Court redefined marriage under the Obergefell decision. This was a moment which it was a long time coming for a particular political lobby, and they had been working toward that day for a really long time. And when they did so, of course, President Obama was supportive of that perspective, and he lit up the White House in rainbow colors in celebration of this. Now, this was an important day because it was something of a climax for an entire political movement, because they had been talking for decades about the inequality of the fact that you couldn't marry somebody of the same gender, and that was always seen as the great indicator of how unequal society was. And once that changed, what happens now? When you're a lobby, when you're a nonprofit, you exist to solve a particular problem, and then it appears to have been solved. What do you do now? Do you fold up the tents? Do you declare victory? We are now obsolete. We are no longer necessary. We're going to go get a job, doing whatever, tuning pianos, painting houses, being engineers, whatever we want to go do. Were they going to do that? And of course, the answer to that is no, because this had become an indispensable part of a political lobby. And this gentleman here, his name is Chad Griffin. He is the head of the Human Rights Campaign in Washington, D.C., which is the largest LGBT lobby organization. And the quote we have here is from the press release that they issued on June 26, 2015, when he said, "What's clear today is that our work isn't done until every discriminatory law in this nation is wiped away. The time has come in this country for comprehensive federal LGBT non-discrimination protections." This was their way of, while simultaneously celebrating the Obergefell decision, indicating there's so much more inequality. there's so much more still to do. And on this day, as a way to justify the fact that they still wanted to raise money, that they needed to still channel to progressive campaigns, they needed to do these things. Why? What's the new cause? And the new cause was transgenderism. And the great new inequality was the fact that there are men's and women's restrooms. That is now the civil rights issue of the day that we must solve, because we just solved the fact that you couldn't marry somebody of the same gender. We discovered that right magically. It had never been found since 1787. Nobody had ever discovered the constitutional right to marry somebody of the same gender, but on June 26th of 2015, it appeared out of dust. And so, but this was their way of signaling what had happened, or what they needed to continue, why they existed. And they needed a new victim class. They needed a new cause to pioneer, and this was the one that was chosen. And so, some of the things that have happened since June 26, 2015, Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner, was named Glamour Magazine's Woman of the Year. It is believed the first time a man has been named Woman of the Year. In athletics, we're seeing this at all levels of athletic competition. Here we have a junior college in California. There's the leading rebounder in the league. And this is in New Zealand. Laurel Hubbard now was Gavin Hubbard until a couple of years ago, was a professional weightlifter as a man into his 30s, then became a woman, and now is doing quite well as a woman. This is in Alaska. In the middle we have a biologically male, now identifying as female student who didn't win that particular race, it doesn't look like. But we also have, there's a story out of Connecticut from last week, where there is a young man who now identifies as female, who in his first track meet as a female, as a college freshman, is 1 second away from the NCAA Women's Championship. And so he will, undoubtedly, by the end of his freshman year, be the most accomplished female athlete in the history of the state of Connecticut. He was very fast and very good as a guy. He's really fast and really good now that he is a girl. We're seeing this in sports. We're seeing this in media, where we have National Geographic, Time Magazine. We have CoverGirl, for the first time, put a boy on the cover of CoverGirl magazine. All kind of communicating this concept of gender fluidity, that it's not what it seems. You can be whatever gender that you want. And it's been making an impact. And what I'm going to do, are you on the speaker? Okay, let's go ahead and adjust this, because I'm going to show you an interview that I did last year, actually, but at Seattle University on this question of gender, that I think is going to help you understand kind of the impact that this is making on our college campuses, because it's matter.
In light of all the conversation about gender and identity, we began wondering if there's even a difference between men and women anymore. We went to Seattle University to find out. You're aware of the conversation going on in Washington State right now around kind of gender identity, gender expression issues, and the ability to access facilities on those grounds?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's gender neutral bathrooms in like all the dorms and stuff like that.
I think that gender is fluid, so if you want to use a bathroom because that's a place and that's a space where you feel comfortable and safe in doing so, then I think that that's completely fine.
I think that if whoever you think you are, if you're male or female, then that's the bathroom you should go to.
I think if it doesn't really negatively affect anybody, then I think anyone should be able to choose what gender they choose to identify as.
People, no matter what their gender identification is, they should be allowed to use whatever restrooms they feel that they identify with.
Is there a difference in your mind between men and women?
No, yes. I mean,
Are you kidding me?
Possibly, in general, yes. But I don't know why I think why.
Socially, currently, yes, there is. There is no need for that difference to exist, scientifically and logically.
If you think that you're a male, if you think that you're a female, that matters more than
there's not much difference besides what society forced on people.
How do you know the difference between them?
By what people think they are. So you can't like judge someone just on like their looks. I don't think there's any one way to really distinguish between a man or a woman, and I don't think it's necessary.
It's not always consistent. It has a high probability, like 98% of the time I can get it right. There is some ambiguity.
I think, yeah, there are ways to tell, but then again, you can always be wrong.
What would you say I am?
Just judging off of your looks, I would say that you're a male. I would probably assume a man, but then you never know.
A male.
Why would you say that?
Based on how I look at you.
Do you think that's a problem?
Yeah, probably.
I think the difference between men and women matters for any reason.
No, not really.
I think most sociologists agree that the concept of gender is more of a societal construct.
I do think it matters somewhat, yeah.
To me, no. I don't feel as if it matters to me because at the end of the day, the person is just a person.
No, I don't think it should matter.
And the differences on a social level are simply a product of a biased society.
Then is there a reason to have those labels, male and female?
I don't think so. I think that it's, again, a social construct of this binary that we're given at birth. There is kind of a difference, but at the same time, if someone wants to identify as one or both or as nothing, I also find that completely okay.
There may be nothing more self-evident in the natural universe than the fact that every animal species is divided into two halves, male and female. Yet the most intelligent of those species seems to be wrestling with whether male or female are actually real things. Have we discovered something new? Or have we become too clever for our own good?
Sometimes when I call a lady sir by accident, they get very offended.
No, can't believe it.
So, I show you that just to illustrate that this is penetrating. You might not have been struggling with it, but in people's classrooms, they have been learning that male and female is whatever you want it to be, and now these are kids who are paying a lot of money for, that was at Seattle University. It's an expensive education, and they can't tell you what the difference between men and women is anymore. So, I think it's very debatable about whether we're getting smarter or dumber. But of course, it's not an intelligence issue, it's what they're being taught. So, that's kind of a preamble to, you know, what the nature of what the environment that we're working in here is. Now, I want to provide kind of a framework for this conversation. 3 perspectives and 3 kind of lenses that each of us come to this conversation with. And this is from a gentleman named Mark Yarhouse. This is not original, but I do find it to be helpful. To kind of understand where people are coming from when they come to this conversation of gender and gender identity, and can you pick your gender or whatever that is. And the first is a position of integrity. And this is often a theologically or religiously based conviction where somebody looks at the question of, can I change my gender, can I be whatever gender I want, or I identify with a gender other than the gender I was born, and their response would be, that's wrong. It's just the sense of, I think I know what God said, and you disagree with God, therefore you're wrong. And it's a fairly simple analysis. The second is one of disability, where it doesn't necessarily come from a position of, you know, a theological conviction, but still a strong conviction that there's a difference between men and women, that there are laws of nature, that male and female are a real thing independent of what you believe, and so if you have a conviction that you are a different gender other than what you were born, you would say that's disordered. And this is where I think we have on this issue, there's a lot of people from the left politically who are, radical feminists would probably fall into this category, where they have a strong conviction about the issue of gender. They've been feminists, they've been fighting for women's rights for their whole lives, and now they're being told that anybody can be a woman, which is kind of offensive to them. And so they come oftentimes from this perspective of they understand, and you can even be very compassionate about the dilemma, because gender dysphoria is a very real thing, but they would ultimately conclude that that's disorder. A third perspective that people come to this conversation with is one of diversity, and their response would be, that's beautiful. And this is just generally where the progressive world is coming from on a whole host of things now. Anything different is good, as long as everybody's consenting. We can celebrate it, it's beautiful. Whatever you think and whatever makes you happy, I'm going to celebrate because, I'm just a good and decent person. And so if that's what you say and that makes you happy, then that's beautiful, and I will celebrate that with you. And I think these are, wherever you come from, or I think it's equally as important to understand where other people are coming from, because if we have a totally different set of lenses on as we look at this problem, if we're an integrity person and we're talking to a diversity person, we're literally speaking a different language, and we've made such different assumptions about the way the world operates that it's very hard to have a conversation until we reach some understanding about what the actual terms mean. Now, having said that, this whole conversation started in a political context, really. I mean, not originally, but for the public consciousness in America, this whole debate started in a political environment. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what the law says and where some of this came from. Nationally, there is no rule on this issue right now. Despite some attempts, there is no federal mandate about who gets to go into what facility or whether you have to acknowledge somebody's gender expression or gender identity. There's no statewide rule there's no national rule about this. Now that isn't because nobody has tried. During the Obama administration, you'll remember last year, the Justice Department and the Education Department got together, redefined some terms in Title IX that allowed President Obama to write a letter to all of the school districts around the country that said, essentially, if you don't allow boys into the girls' locker rooms because they identify as girls, then you are going to lose your federal funding. Now we all know that President Trump was elected, and one of the first things that he did was revoke the federal government's position on that in saying, no, the federal government is no longer going to threaten the federal funding because of this issue. So as of right now, there is no federal rule. Now, it doesn't mean nobody tried, because Congress for more than a decade has been, some in Congress have been trying to pass legislation that would include sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression into the federal non-discrimination statute. And they have been unsuccessful in doing so, which is why the Obama administration finally got tired of dealing with the legislative branch of the Constitution and decided to do it himself. But, of course, that has been repealed. Now, this is the case, Gigi versus Gloucester. This is Gavin Grimm, born female, now identifies as male, is kind of the face of the case that was brought against the state of Virginia to require them to allow her into the boys' restrooms. Now, I highlight this and show you the picture for just so we understand the optics of this, is that the left is very smart in the way they handle this, because they are using a biological female who wants to access the boys' locker room as the lead plaintiff in this story. What they're not going to do is use a biological male who wants to access the girls' locker room at school to be their poster child. And the reason is the public responds very differently to those scenarios. There's many people who are concerned with a girl being in their boys' locker room, but there's many more people who are concerned, and more intensely concerned, about the prospect of an 18, 17-year-old boy going into the girls' locker room with his daughter at PE and taking his clothes off. And so this is the case. It had been heading to the Supreme Court until the Trump administration reversed their decision. Now, what the law says around the country, just covered the United States. In North Carolina, they have had this, they've been kind of on a seesaw on this whole thing. Originally, they took a position that you could only use a facility consistent with your gender on your birth certificate. As of about 2 weeks ago, they compromised. Some say they repealed, though nobody really thinks it was a full repeal. But they now have the position that there's no legal liability for using a facility consistent with your gender identity or gender expression. But at the same time, businesses are free to set their own policies on those issues. In the state of Texas, they are currently entertaining legislation to require in schools facilities to be segregated based on biological sex. In the state of Massachusetts, They are the only state in the union whose legislature has acted to specifically allow boys to go into the locker rooms in schools by identifying as female. They have a referendum in the state of Massachusetts has been filed. They will be voting on this in November of 2018. And here in Washington State, we have the honor of being the ones who kind of got the ball rolling on this whole thing, because we were the first state in the union to create a statewide policy around this. Our Human Rights Commission did it, much like what the Obama administration did in Congress, or in Washington, D.C., because they were frustrated that Congress would not do it kind of unilaterally by redefining some terms, created a brand new policy that far exceeded any intention of any law that the legislature had ever passed. And essentially what it did, among other things, is it guaranteed access to facilities in schools and businesses based on gender expression or gender identity. Connected, not part of the regulation, but OSPI followed it up with some guidelines around education that said you must teach gender identity beginning in kindergarten. And third, part of these regulations were the harassment provisions of the Human Rights Commission rules said that it's illegal to ask unwelcome questions or to misuse pronouns. Which is, you can't ask unwelcome questions about somebody's gender identity, gender expression. So if you ask somebody if they're a boy or a girl, that could be theoretically an unwelcome question and therefore be illegal harassment. In the same way that if you misuse pronouns, that could also constitute illegal harassment for a public accommodation. Again, it's not just for sidewalk conversation among people in the public, but it specifically applies to businesses. So if you own a business and somebody in your, in the business wants you to refer to them singularly as they, and that kind of offends your senses of what grammar is, you could be fined or otherwise punished by the Human Rights Commission for doing so. So that's what the current state of the law around this stuff is. There's more to it, but those are some of the highlights or lowlights, be it as it may. Which is also, back to, we've already talked about this a little bit, an Initiative 1552 would not solve all of these problems, but what it does is two things, is it requires schools to maintain separate facilities based on biological sex, and if any student is not comfortable with those options, the school would be required to find them an accommodation, short of revoking the right to privacy of every other student in the school. The second thing that it does is it gives businesses the freedom to set their own policies around these issues. So if you own a gas station and you have 2 single-stall facilities, you probably aren't that worried about it. However, if you're a gym owner and you have a locker room where people get undressed as part of their experience there, you probably have more of an interest in making sure that guys can't go into the women's facilities and take their clothes off. And right now it's illegal for a business owner to guarantee that privacy to their patrons. So this would fix that. Now, we're going to get on to kind of the nuts and bolts of what are we talking about, what do they mean, there's an infinite number of genders, and we are going to highlight how this is being presented in public schools a lot. What you have always thought of as gender is probably this. There's pink, there's blue, there's boys and girls. Next question, let's move on. This isn't that interesting. But boy, is it getting more interesting, because this creature, this is the gender unicorn that has been introduced in a lot of public schools that is now being used to communicate the way that we are supposed to be seeing gender now. Now, let me highlight a few things. Here in the middle, we have sex assigned at birth. That is the phrase that is being used to refer to sex or gender as we've always understood it. Most people have used the terms sex and gender synonymously. They're the same thing. Whatever you're born, that's what you are. And so we move on. That's what they don't, the left does not deny that there is such thing as anatomy and biology, and they know that you're born with a certain set of chromosomes, and that means something, and you have an anatomy. But they would say that that's sex assigned at birth, which is totally independent and totally unrelated to all of these other categories, the second of which is, and I'll go in this order, is gender identity. So your gender identity, from their perspective, is completely independent of your sex assigned at birth. You might identify with the sex that you're assigned at birth, or you might not. Your gender identity can be anything. That's based in your head and how you feel. But then you have gender expression, which is how you act based on how you feel. And there are very different ways to act out whatever gender that you are feeling. And then down here we have who you're physically attracted to, who you're emotionally attracted to, which kind of falls under the umbrella that is commonly referred to as sexual orientation. Now, so these are the various parts of the gender unicorns trying to get us to understand all these different things. Now, how is this being communicated? And we're going to kind of revisit some of these concepts as we go, and I understand I haven't answered all your questions quite yet. But we're going to highlight some things in the Flash curriculum. And this is called Family Life and Sexual Health Curriculum. It was originally created in the King County School District. It's now making its way all over the state, really, up in Sequim and Port Angeles. Very recently, they've been having a debate about whether to adopt this. Many school boards are adopting this outside of King County. And so we're going to talk about some of how this is being rolled out. And so one of the ways, and we're beginning K through 12, starting in kindergarten, these are some of the questions we're asking. And I have a kindergartner, and this is a very funny question if you ask my kindergartner. If you could be born again and pick your gender, you would what? Stay the same or change to the other gender? Which is not a question that most kindergartners are intuitively asking themselves. They're not pondering this question because they're not struggling with this. This is not a difficult thing for 99.99% of kindergartners. But of course, early on, we're now introducing the idea that, well, you can pick to be another gender. Really? I'd never considered that. And then down below, I've just highlighted for your edification some of the vocabulary words that we are introducing to kindergartners. And my kindergartner does not know these words, at least not most of them, and nor do I want him to. But yeah, this is just some of the things that are coming out of the Flash curriculum. Now, how the gender unicorn is presenting this idea of gender. We've always thought we had the girl in the dress and the blue guy, kind of the male and female. We've always thought them as like two different options. Pick A or pick B. The way they want us to think about gender now is more like a faucet. You have hot water, you have cold water, and then you have a whole bunch of temperatures in between. And that's kind of in here and drop. And that's the gender spectrum. And you'll hear them say, and you heard in those interviews, you hear a lot of them talk about, we've been told gender is binary, but I believe gender is fluid. And this is what they mean when they say that, is there's this whole spectrum of gender. Here's super, 100% masculine and 100% feminine, and then there's all these spaces in between here, which represents various forms of androgyny. But even this is kind of outdated because they've moved on a little bit. And this is how they want you to think of the gender spectrum. Now, where we have 3 different data points, and I'll explain, this would be super masculine, 100% masculine, 100% feminine, and then up here we have androgynous. And these are kind of the 3 data points, and then everywhere else in between here, you could be somewhere between very masculine and very androgynous. You could be somewhere between very feminine and very masculine, or very feminine and very androgynous, or you could be right here in the middle, which is no gender at all. Which is the state of Oregon has now given legal recognition in the last month, you can be genderless. You can identify as genderless in the state of Oregon, which is in theory, it's that point right there. That's genderless. Now, from their perspective, and you'll hear them, if you have enough conversations or read the literature, you'll hear them say there are an infinite number of genders. And I heard, talking to a transgender person online last week, everybody is transgender. That's their conviction. Everybody is transgender because what they believe is that every single dot on this map represents a new gender. Each one of these points, if you could classify them, every single degree between masculine and androgynous and feminine and masculine, all those points on there is a unique individual gender. So there are an infinite number of genders because there's an infinite number of people and ways to be and a way to express yourself. So this is how they are viewing gender. Now, we've gone to the trouble of identifying just 32 of these. Remember, there's an infinite number. On Facebook, you can pick 56. But here are just 32 of them, and I know that the font is small, so I'll read some of these for you. We're going to go from here: female, male, bigender, androgyne, neutral, agender, genderless, intergender, demi-boy, demi-girl, third gender, genderqueer, non-binary, pangender, polygender, epicene, gender fluid, transgender, good old-fashioned transgender alternative version, bigender, androgyne, and neutral, bigender, third gender, and demi-boy, demi-agender with demi-girl, gender fluid, female and male, gender fluid, intergender and neutral, gender fluid third gender and demigirl, gender fluid androgyne and female, agender version 1, agender version 2, agender version gendervoid, demi-agender with third gender, of course, femme, butch, travesti, NB, and then aliyah gender. So those are just 32 of the infinite number of genders that one could identify as. Well, it is kind of a different language, and I don't even know anybody, even on the left, I don't know that they know what these things mean. But it's kind of, the whole point of this is a little bit is to allow you to kind of pick your own. And you'll hear, if you go online and kind of read the experiences of, especially like transgender teenagers who are kind of exploring all this stuff, it's like they're trying to find, no, that's not me, and that's not me, and that's not me, and they eliminate all these thousands of options, and then they finally, create one that they think is them. So, I'm not under the impression that it's going to all be clear. So, but here's a term in this whole world that might be important, that is part of this conversation. It's called performative. And the concept here is that gender is not something that you are, it's something that you do, which is why they have this whole idea of gender expression. Because there's a way you feel, there's also a way you express, and gender is something that you perform. Now, are you confused yet about any of this? I had some clarity, and it might come to you as well, came to me in a conversation with a radical feminist about this conversation, when she said, what they mean every time they use the word gender, what they really mean is personality. And so if you read their literature or listen to their conversations, and every time they use the term gender, you substitute the word personality and what we understand personality to mean, then suddenly it's not so crazy. It's not so confusing, because there are an infinite number of personalities, right? Because there are no two people. You have the exact same DNA as your twin, and you will be very different people. And so you go back to that gender blob, and you realize that every point on there represents different kind of ratios of your personality and we're all going to end up at a different place on them. If we could agree on what even those things mean. But we're comfortable with the idea that everyone is different. Men are different from women generally, and all men are in some ways different from every other man, because we're all individuals. But of course, it begs the question, why are we trying to complicate gender? Why can't we just say, hey, well, we're all different, and we have different personalities, and from my perspective, God made us each different and unique, and that's really good, and that's a good thing. Why do we have to complicate it and redefine what everybody's always understood gender to mean there's no boundaries and you can be whatever you want to be? They answer this question in their own curriculum. And now, before I go to some of these next slides, I'm going to break a rule of PowerPoints by throwing a lot of text up here. And we're going to read more than I would like to have you read. But the reason we're doing this is because I want you to see exactly as it's being presented in the Flash curriculum, because I didn't want to kind of paraphrase it, and then you wonder if that actually what they're saying is that actually what they're meaning. So we're going to have some text up here, and we're going to read this, but that's the reason why. And this, again, back to the Flash curriculum, this is the introduction of the high school Flash curriculum. So in high school grades, they're going to talk about why are we doing this, okay? And so this up here it says rationale of this Flash curriculum. And it says here, the prevention of sexual violence is both a behavioral role of Flash in its own right and an important strategy for preventing teen pregnancies and STDs. So, okay, the rationale, they want to prevent sexual violence, and everybody says, okay, we're all on board with that. Now, they get down to understanding undoing gender stereotypes is the foundation of Flash's sexual violence prevention. Now, if we walked in here tonight, the first thing I'd ask you is, hey, how do you think we can get rid of sexual violence in our communities? How long would it have taken before somebody said, hey, we need to undo gender stereotypes? It would have taken a long time. Because we don't intuitively go to the fact that, oh yeah, it's certainly a misrepresentation of gender that's causing this problem. But that, by their own admission, the reason we have to undo gender stereotypes is because from their perspective, that is how we are going to get rid of sexual violence. Now, that's not intuitive, but here's the gender stereotypes that they are trying to do away with. And again, it's all written here verbatim if you want to take the time to read that, but some of the highlights are, essentially, the stereotypes that they have to undo is that women are submissive, weak, hormonal, moody, jealous, clingy, and dramatic. Men are tough. They are not to show weakness. They are in charge and sexually in control. And so these are, from my perspective, the straw men that they build up to say, this is what boys are being told they should be as boys, and this is what girls are being told they should be as girls. And because they are all, every girl and every boy is trying to live out these gender stereotypes, they are finding themselves in a situation where sexual violence is being committed. Now, my own experience is my own experience. I grew up in Aberdeen, so I grew up in like small town, conservative, Christian land. That was my life. And so I think I'm kind of the problem from the left's perspective in most respects. But I honestly don't know anyone that I have ever known who would affirm these descriptions of men and women as what is expected of men and women. And when we showed these, when I first encountered these in the curriculum, and we showed them around the office, one of the gals in the office said, I think somebody is projecting their abusive childhood on everybody else. And I actually think there's probably a ton of truth to that. Because the mind that came up with the idea that we have to get rid of these stereotypes as a way of reducing sexual violence, when I literally can't think of anyone. I mean, we all make jokes about men and women and how, different they are, and men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And we all kind of chuckle at that stuff. So we know there's a difference. But I don't know anyone who would say, yeah, you little girl, and I have 3 daughters, who tells their daughter, this is your job? What man or woman says this is how you're supposed to grow up? And what man or woman tells their son that you're supposed to grow up like this? I don't know anybody. But this is what's being told. This is how it's being presented in the classroom, saying, this is what you're being told to be as a man or a woman, and we need to reject these gender stereotypes. And of course, the solution to that is then there's no gender. But how is this being worked out? So these are the descriptions. This is kind of the scenario that's being built up in school. And so here is a class discussion as presented in the teacher's handbook on how this is going to be discussed. So the first scenario, after we set up these gender stereotypes. On Saturday night, Alicia had sex with her girlfriend, even though she wasn't in the mood, because she didn't want to hurt her girlfriend's feelings. That's the scenario. Which traditional expectations of women is likely influencing Alicia's actions? She's passive, weak. How might Alicia feel in this situation? Well, she might feel bad or ashamed that she had sex even though she didn't want to. Confused, angry, sad, like she can't talk to her girlfriend. What problems could this expectation cause for Alicia? Well, she could end up doing things she doesn't feel good about, could have problems with her girlfriend. What advice would you give to Alicia to challenge this gender expectation? Don't have sex if you don't want to. Share what you do or do not want to do with your girlfriend. So that's one fact pattern, and that's the conversation that the class is going to have. Then this next one. Cooper tells his girlfriend that he wants to have sex tonight, but doesn't ask her what she wants. Which traditional expectation of men is likely influencing Cooper's actions? That he's sexually in control. What problems could this expectation cause for Cooper? Well, his girlfriend might break up with him. He could commit rape. What advice would you give to Cooper to challenge this gender expectation? Ask her if she wants to have sex, and only have sex if his girlfriend also wants to. Now, in the legal world, we call it issue spotting, where we read a fact pattern and we spot all the legal issues that exist within the fact pattern. Now, you guys most of you are parents or have been parents. If Cooper and Alicia are your child, and they come to you, and you have to help Cooper and Alicia, how long does it take you before you get to gender expectations? Okay, Cooper and Alicia, here's your challenge. I think all of us can see a whole host of issues in Cooper and Alicia's life that that come up way before we get to your gender expectations, Cooper and Alicia. We just don't see this as the root of your challenge. But notice what happens in the classroom when you talk about it this way. Is Cooper and Alicia and everybody else in the classroom, they know that their conscience and everything they know is telling them is raised a bunch of red flags before that, but when the teacher immediately brushes over all the innate inhibitions they have that would be keeping them out of the problem in the first place, and rush straight to the only thing that you could do bad is not communicate effectively about your sex life with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, and as soon as you've developed the skills to do that, by all means, go knock yourself out, and here's the accessories. And that's the environment, the conversation that is being facilitated within the classroom. And then as soon as they get done with this, the teacher is instructed to show this video, LGBTQ discrimination, and there's the website for that, which is also on the Flash curriculum page, and I assure you, it is not what I want my kids to be learning about with LGBTQ discrimination stuff. Now, we get to the very deal with this gender conversation, and I put this warning up here. I don't see any children in the room tonight, so we're going to be fine. Sometimes we have kids, and I would not want my kids in for this part of this, but you're all adults, and I'm going to show you what this is. So introducing the 7 methods. Again, note, this is for 7th and 8th grade. This is a flash curriculum for 7th and 8th graders in Washington State. Focusing on what, and this is an instruction to introduce the 7 methods of birth control that are emphasized in this, focusing on what each is and how it reduces teen pregnancy. And then it refers to some reference sheets. Now, and again, making the point that they make again at the very end, which methods can teenagers get without parental consent? And the answer, all of these. Which is not to imply that this is ideal, although we realize that in an ideal world, every child could share this coming-of-age decision with his or her family. The law recognizes that some families can't or don't talk about sexual issues, and the most important thing is helping people prevent unintended pregnancy. So again, we're really educating them thoroughly in the idea that their parents don't have to have any idea what's going on, and they can get anything they need from their school, from Planned Parenthood, without their parents knowing. Now, I'm not even going to read this because it's embarrassing, but I'm going to let you read this because this is also in the 7th and 8th grade flash curriculum. I had no idea what a dental dam was, and I don't feel any worse for it when I do. But this is part of the 7th and 8th grade flash curriculum. You're welcome. But on the same page, we have this discussion about anal intercourse, describing, of course, what this is. But I'm going to highlight the instructions from the teacher below that on this page discussing anal intercourse and dental dams. Probably some students in your class will make inappropriate noises and comments at the idea of anal intercourse. It is important to not allow disrespectful remarks. Because people have diverse beliefs about intercourse, this would be an appropriate time to use the values question protocol. So consider the context of this whole thing. We just had this big long discussion about Cooper and Alicia, and about how the only possible thing that they could be doing wrong in their relationship is just not making sure everybody's in the mood before they engage in whatever sexual activity that they want to engage in. Making sure that that's been a completely judgment-free environment. Then, in our conversation about dental dams and anal intercourse with our 7th and 8th graders, the only thing that we are going to judge and criticize is the potential that some of the students would make a joke about this and therefore create an atmosphere that would make other kids in the room think that it's not cool to have anal sex. That's the only thing that this curriculum goes out of its way to be judgmental of. And we're going to make sure that the teachers, facilitate the conversation, make sure they know about the 7 methods, make sure they know they can get it for free, and that their parents don't know, and oh, by the way, they can be whatever gender they want, and all we need to do is make sure everybody consents. Oh, but if anybody wants to ridicule any of this behavior that's really, really bad for them, by the way, make sure you put a thumb on that. Now, who writes this curriculum? And again, that's just the tip of the iceberg on much of this stuff. But it's going to become clear, I think, a little bit where this is coming from. Now, who writes this? This is the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade curriculum. There's 2 names that have been highlighted. It's Elizabeth Beth Reese. She's on here a few times. And then Brent Neeson helped Beth Reese with this curriculum. This is Beth Reese. She's on the right there. She right now teaches gender studies at the University of Oregon in Eugene. But when she lived in Washington State and was writing this curriculum, she and her partner were the lead plaintiffs on a lawsuit challenging Washington State's Defense of Marriage Act back in 2005. Back when we still had a law defining marriage as a relationship between a man and a woman, her and her partner were activists enough that they became the lead plaintiffs that went to the state Supreme Court challenging the constitutionality of a law defining marriage between a man and a woman. Brent Neeson is her collaborator on the grade school curriculum. This is his Facebook profile picture, also in a same-sex relationship. Looks like a very friendly, happy guy. Here is his New Year's greeting from 2015 that I just pulled off of his Facebook page. And I'm going to read it to you to give an indication of who is writing the grade school curriculum. Happy New Year's, everyone. I wish you all more laughter, more economic equality, less racism, more Democratic candidates in office, more steps toward universal health care, more acceptance of refugees, less military intervention, fewer guns and gun deaths, less inane attacks on Planned Parenthood and women's rights, more heroes in movies who are people of color and women and transgender and gay, less white privilege, more dialogue, less acceptance that it's okay for anyone to die for the color of their skin, in war or by terrorism, domestic or abroad, less shame about sex, more sex if you want it, less hating on people for just being who they are, or for having or performing a completely legal medical procedure called abortion, less environmental pollution, fewer fossil fuels used, more garbage recycled or composted, less plastic in our oceans, and more appreciation that life is short and beautiful and amazing, and all of its moments are to be relished and with exuberance. So, his positions aren't particularly remarkable. He's kind of a run-of-the-mill progressive. There's lots of people that we know who would feel this way. But he, along with the chief plaintiff against Washington's marriage law, are the two people writing the sex ed curriculum, both of whom are in same-sex relationships, are the two people writing the sex ed curriculum, catechizing your grade schoolers about how to feel about family, life, sex, gender, all of those things. Now let's go to the high school curriculum. We have 5 authors listed on this, and from what you can find just by public perusal, 2 of them are in same-sex relationships openly. So that gives 4 of the 7. And I don't know about the other 3. And, you know, it's a free country, and they're, of course, entitled to be in whatever relationships they want. So we don't feature this information to, like, disparage them as individuals, because I don't know them as people. But it's a strong indicator of their worldview, of where they're coming from, of what their perspective is. And when we send our kids to school and say, hey, teachers, go ahead and teach our children, we trust you to do what they undoubtedly think they are doing, what is right, but they have a very different set of glasses through which they view the world. They have very different assumptions about what is healthy, what is not healthy, and they are trying to create a very different impression for our children than many of us would want to create for our children ourselves. Now, I want to emphasize the fact that parental rights are still very, very strong in this country. And this is a quote from Troxel versus Granville, which is a landmark parental rights case in the homeschooling context, emphasizing the fact that we as parents still have the right to know where our kids are learning and to make the determinative decisions about what they learn, what they don't learn, and when they if they don't learn certain things that we don't want them exposed to. But the problem is, there's a couple of problems here. One is that most of us don't take the time and energy to care. Is that it's much easier to just pass it off to other people and just hope for the best and believe that, you know, we're trying to teach our kids the right thing, and what they're learning in school, and we just hope they have some good teachers. But there's also another layer, is that when parents do get involved, it gets very complicated. Because not every school administrator or superintendent or principal, for that matter, is eager to deal with parents. And we have a little story from a Douglas Adams book here that I think explains the experience a lot of people have when they deal with education bureaucracies as well as a lot of other bureaucracies. And what he said, these are 2 characters talking. He says, but the plans were on display. On display, I eventually had to go down to the cellar to find them. That's the display department. With a flashlight. Oh, well, the lights had probably gone out. So had the stairs. But look, you found the notice, didn't you? Yes, said Arthur. Yes, I did. It was on display in the bottom of a locked filing cabinet, stuck in a disused lavatory, with a sign on the door saying, beware of the leopard. That is the experience a lot of people have when they try to begin asking questions and find out, what are you teaching my kids, and what is this stuff? And I know that, you know, in the Edmonds School District, which is kind of over in my neighborhood, they have created a policy that if parents want to see the sex ed curriculum, they have a limited number of hours that they can look at it. They can only look at it in the school library, and they're not allowed to copy anything. All of which is definitely illegal if somebody wanted to challenge it, but that's kind of that's an indication of the mentality, is we're going to make it as hard as possible for you to inspect these things because we don't want you interfering with what we're doing. But ultimately, parents still have the legal right to do so. Now, to summarize some of this, what now? We are a faith-based organization, and I know some of you will share that perspective, and some of you may not. But the way that we want, this is a complicated conversation. There are many, many layers to it. But we are hoping to encourage people to think about this conversation around gender identity, and then some of the issues about sexuality as well, in three different contexts that we need to be prepared for. One is that one-on-one conversation. Is that whether we are part of a church and somebody who is transgender comes into our congregation, or whether our kids are dealing with somebody in their classroom who is claiming to be the opposite gender, or it's just somebody that we know at work who just underwent a gender reassignment. How do we have a conversation as individuals with people who are also created in God's image, who have hurts and needs and should feel valuable as people? They may be broken in a different way than we are broken, but these are real people that deserve compassion and care, and we need to be prepared to do that and to show that compassion and care in those situations where we are with Him. That's one of the things that I think the church should be trying to do, and is capable of doing, and in many cases is doing that. And that's just one context, though, in that one-on-one interaction. The second is within the church corporately. Now, we work in a lot of church environments, and one of the things that we've discovered is a lot of churches are not having this conversation in any way. And partly it's because it's difficult, it's seen as political in some circles, but the result of this is you see who is catechizing and who's teaching our kids in schools about these issues and the direction that they're trying to push them. And then the place where they could be getting the other perspective and could be getting equipped to know what the truth is as opposed to what they're being fed, are choosing not to do so because, and there's a variety of reasons why that should be. But we do think it's important that truth, for those who are the guardians of truth, and that is the church, that we need to not be afraid to apply what is true to this conversation when it is being so aggressively pushed, when the lie is being so aggressively pushed. So that's another context. And the third context is the culture. And that is the communities, the state, the government, the nation that we live in. And what we're finding, what I'm discovering, is that we have, these different spheres that we all operate in. And there are a lot of people who only want to focus on the individual, and we totally avoid these because we're afraid that if we talk about what's true in a larger conversation, that's going to jeopardize our ability to do this. And then there's other personalities who are so hot to trot about what's going on in the culture, and they're ready to take their pitchfork and run down to Olympia and never mind the carnage that they cause to the individuals in the way they engage in that. And we would like to think, and I believe it's true, that all of these are important, and all of these have there are different strategies, and there are different approaches, but we can't neglect any of them because all of them matter a great deal. And the analogy that I would apply to this is, you have a war and you have a mash unit, and it is their job to patch people together when they get hurt. And you need that role, and that's what's happening right here, that one-on-one. We're going to bandage you up and we're going to see how we can help. But if you see a pattern and there's a bunch of people coming in with the same injuries from the same place, at some point it behooves you to stick your head up a little bit and figure out what's going on over there that's causing all of this carnage. And we got to send somebody over there to prevent the harm from happening. And that's, I think, where the culture comes in. That's what's going on. There's all these lies being perpetuated that people are embracing, and that they're making decisions consistent with what they were told were true. It's ultimately ruining their life. And then we want to patch them back together, but it'd be a whole lot better if we could prevent the harm from happening in the first place. So all of these are important, but they serve different purposes, and we don't want to neglect any of them. Now, as I wrap this here, I'm going to throw this far side up here. And for those of you who can't read this, in the back, I'm going to read this down here. It says, "Say, what's a mountain goat doing up here in a cloud bank?" way up here in the cloud bank. Why is this funny? Well, because it's far side, right? It's funny. But beyond just the fact that it's far side, why is this funny? Because this exposes a very human instinct, where when we're sure that we're right, we will interpret any fact that we encounter in a way that supports our belief that we're right. So we're flying a plane through the cloud. The much more likely explanation is that they are about to fly their plane into a mountain, right? But they do not want to consider the possibility that they have made a mistake, that they are wrong. So they are going to interpret that particular fact in a way that allows them to continue believing that they are correct. Now, this is not a partisan criticism. This is a human criticism. But we are dealing with this phenomenon right now in what's going on with the moral revolution that we talked about. Because it started, this whole conversation about gender started way back first as a conversation about sexual orientation. You should be able to love whoever you want to love and do whatever you want to do as long as everybody's adult and everybody consents. Which led very logically into this idea that, well, why would marriage be as a relationship between a man and a woman? Because, I mean, how discriminatory is that? And so the purpose of this institution is just to affirm the relationships that the adults have. And gender doesn't need to matter. And then as soon as gender doesn't need to matter, well then, I guess gender doesn't matter. But of course the logic here is very self-defeating. Because how do you have a sexual orientation if you can't tell by looking at someone whether they're a male or female? If gender is fluid, if there's no such thing as gender, what in the world is a sexual orientation? So how do you hold these positions simultaneously that, well, sexual orientation is fixed and innate and immutable, but at the same time, your gender is fluid and it can change from moment to moment or day by day or year by year if you want it to. It just kind of depends on how you're feeling. Those are not logically reconcilable positions, but the thread that binds them is the worldview claim of the people who hold that position. I'm a Christian, and my perspective is that the purpose of our existence is to know God and enjoy Him forever. Glorify God and enjoy Him forever. That is a fundamental claim of the Christian, Judeo-Christian perspective. If you are a secular humanist, your claim, your underlying truth claim is that the end of all being is the happiness of man. If my life is accidental, if it's not, doesn't have any intrinsic purpose, if it's fairly random, the end of all being is the happiness of man. The purpose of my existence, then, is to find happiness. That's the only thing that I can hope for. And the purpose of your existence is to find happiness. And therefore, if that is the purpose of our existence, all these things suddenly start to make sense. Because why should I be able to have sex with whoever I want to, whenever I want to, as long as everybody consents? Because there's no overarching truth prohibiting me from doing so. And if those things will make me happy, then by all means I should be happy. And why on earth would you want to interfere with my happiness? And if that makes me happy, then of course those relationships should be recognized as marriage, because otherwise it's bigotry, and you're affirming somebody else's happiness to the exclusion of other people's happiness. And the only reason for any of this is to find happiness. And therefore, well, if you don't want to marry or whatever you want to do, but of course, now that we know gender doesn't really matter, of course you can be whatever gender you want. If you're gender dysphoric and you believe that being a different gender is going to make you happy, I'm not a terrible person. Of course I want you to be happy. And so I will affirm you in all of those things. The thread that makes these otherwise irreconcilable positions, and the people hold all these positions simultaneously, and they feel no cognitive dissonance, because they don't have a framework that allows them to consider the possibility of whether something is false, even though they have good intentions and they want it to be true. Because if there's no truth, there's no way, the question is absurd. How can you be wrong if you have good intentions? You can't. And so, all of these things make sense. But, if those things are not true, if the end of all being is not the happiness of man, but if we have been created for a purpose intentionally, if there are rules that were designed not to destroy our fun, but to allow human flourishing, well then all of these things are highly destructive. And so this whole gender thing is part of a progression, and it doesn't stop here. at all. Because I don't know if you've heard of the transabled community, the transabled world, which are disabled people born in healthy bodies. And they go to doctors to get limbs chopped off and to have their spinal cord severed so that they can live their true identity as the disabled selves that they know themselves to be. They throw acid in their eyes to blind themselves because they know they're blind. Their eyes function perfectly well. And you have now the other kin phenomenon, which is in high schools. I talk other kin are people who identify as a different species. I know a freshman at the University of Washington right now who went to high school in Wisconsin last year with 2 cats. 2 kids walked around, meowed at kids. They have tails, and they had whiskers attached to their face. And the school was like, yeah, just be respectful and be tolerant. This is not, I mean, there is no limit to the insanity once you accept the idea that we can do whatever we want to do as long as it makes us happy. And fundamentally, our answer to this, my answer to this, and I think, and this is definitely a theological underpinning to this, is how do we love people? Because love is a buzzword. Everybody agrees about, yeah, love is good, we should love each other. But what do we mean by that? Do we love them by giving them what makes them happy, which is what you would do if you believe you'd be happy, so I will affirm whatever it is that you think makes you happy. Or do we love people by giving them what is true? And from my perspective, love is defined in 1 Corinthians 13. And there's a great deal of agreement when it comes to love as patient and kind and long-suffering and gentle and patient. But the qualifier in there that creates a biblical, a real contrast between a biblical concept of love and a cultural concept of love is when it says, love does not rejoice in iniquity, but it rejoices in the truth. And love, from God's perspective, assumes that things are true. And so when you go back to what's going on in the world of sexual orientation and marriage and now gender, that if something is true, and you can see the carnage that is piling up in the culture, and much of which is in our own families, because people believe they could do whatever they wanted to do because there's no truth, and the only purpose of our lives is to be happy. And when we believe that, when we internalize that, and when we make decisions based on that, the consequences are everywhere. And that's what we're facing as a culture. And that this, to me, is the big question for us. And I think, in the church in particularly, there's a moment for a gut check, because it's hard. And it does require courage now, because there's a lot of opposition to this whole concept. But this, I think, is fundamentally the question for each of us. And to take the answer to this question, how are we going to love people? We're going to love people the way they want us to be loved. They want us to love them, or the way God tells us to love them. And are we going to do that well, individually, in the church, and in the culture, in all these different contexts that we find ourselves? And there's a lot of gray area to navigate in there, and there's not a simple answer to every single one of those dilemmas. But I think this, for us, as we understand where they're coming from, and we understand what our responsibility is, hopefully this helps us have a little bit of a perspective on how to do a little better. So, I'm done, and now we have some time for some questions.
Okay, we're going to take questions. If you want to line up here, it'll be kind of like the town hall thing, and good questions.
About her and what they're doing in kindergarten through 3rd grade also?
Yeah. Well, I've given you some illustrations of kind of how this is being done. OSPI has now said you need this, their standard. It's not a requirement. They won't tell you it's not a requirement, but it's not a requirement for school districts. They don't have to, but they're going to say the standard they're hoping is that you'll start teaching gender expression and gender identity in kindergarten. It doesn't mean everybody is right now, but that is their hope. I showed you some horrible things as far as the curriculum. A student's experience will vary wildly depending on who the actual instructor is. This is the curriculum, and I know there's a lot of good, my sister is a public school teacher, there's a lot of good people in the public education system who are allies of ours in this and would not, propagandize my child in a way that, another child would. So classroom to classroom, school to school, I think the experience is going to be very different. But knowing that this is the baseline, and for a lot of people in this world, this is kind of the Bible of sex ed in Washington State, is the FLASH curriculum. And if you talk to people about it, when people try to bring alternatives, they often ask the question, well, how does this compare to the FLASH curriculum? So I can't tell you exactly what your 3rd grader is experiencing. This is just, I hope, a window into what is out there. And I hope this motivates a bunch of parents to start asking more questions. And then I hope this motivates a bunch of parents and grandparents to go run for school board. Because ultimately, school boards can nip all this in the bud and say, not here. And they're not difficult positions to win, necessarily, and they have a tremendous amount of influence when it comes to the minds of our kids. So that's what I hope people will do in response to this.
Can I lighten this up a little bit? Remember the cartoon when you were a kid, two juniors, they're in diapers? And this one guy keeps looking, yes, there is a difference.
Yeah, well,
Yeah. Shouldn't have said that.
well, it used to settle the issue. It used to settle the issue. Yep.
I'm going to enlighten it up a little bit. I just pulled up the flash curriculum on here.
Yeah.
And I looked at some of the revisions that they've done. And I'm a nurse. And one of the revisions that was done back in 2010, this has been written for a long time for King County. This goes back to 2010. But it says, please replace 9/10/ lesson 1, page 8, lesson 30, page 5, and lesson 24. Page 5 and 6. We remove the advice to wash and urinate before and after sex as a way to reduce STD transmission. The evidence does not support the recommendation. I'm a nurse. If they put that in the curriculum to begin with, it kind of gives you a clue on who's writing these curriculums. They don't know what they're talking about. That's concerning.
I think, yeah. My take on who is writing the curriculum, I think that if we actually showed you kind of a mini bio of 4 of the 7 who are writing that. And I think this is a function of her people. And I know that they are doing their best, and I think the motivation, or I think a lot of grace is appropriate from our side, is, though, I mean, we got to fight this too, but I think they do this, and they don't have kids. So why are they so excited about writing sex ed curriculum? It's because I believe that if you found out their stories, you'd find so much pain in their own lives, and they attribute that pain to the fact that people like me are judgmental. And as soon as they can eradicate all those people who are critical and judgmental and intolerant, then their pain would go away, and they can spare every other kid the experience and the pain and the bullying that they experience. Now, of course, I don't grant the premise of the problem, but I think that is how they see it, which is why they're going to save all the transgender kids from killing themselves by getting rid of this idea that you can't be whatever gender they want, because that's the only possible explanation from their, they're the pilots in the plane who see this problem with, 46% of transgender kids attempting suicide, and they are not willing to consider the possibility that it actually is, a challenge from them, and maybe there's trauma, or maybe there's, there's some mental health issues there. That is not a possibility they're willing to consider, so they have to explain those facts in a way that doesn't allow them to consider the fact that they're wrong, and the only possible explanation is it's attributable to people who don't embrace it entirely.
Let's do a few more questions, and remember to tell us who you are before you ask the question.
My name is Loretta Burns. Can you hear me? So I like your point when they made about that this is also about personality, all these different gender types. And I wondered, are our youth and in our culture feeling so disaffected that when they're unhappy or they don't feel connected, they want to, this is something that they can grasp on to sort of explain why they might be unhappy. And I don't know if there's any research on that or how much they know about it.
I think the answer, are young people grasping onto this? I think yes. I don't know if this is going to be a direct answer to your question, but there is now, the transgender population is exploding because the concept of transgender is exploding. Because it used to be transgenderism was people who experienced gender dysphoria, which is a very real psychological phenomenon where people really feel a great deal of stress because they feel like they're in the wrong body. Now that we have the gender blob, and they're making the argument that everybody is transgender. I mean, I was talking a week and a half ago to a mom in where was that? Somewhere in Eastern Washington. But her middle school kid had gone to some event and came back, and the kids that she was talking to were telling them, well, they were 51% male and 49% female, one guy. And then another kid was like 73. So they all believe that they're transgender now because they're being told that unless you sit around and spit and scratch yourself like old Uncle Hank, who is kind of like 100% masculine, anything short of that is you're part feminine, which means you're transgender. And so I do think that, but there also, because it's so vogue now, that there's definitely this way for kids, and I've heard these anecdotes of like kids move from like bullied, harassed, no friends at all, to the most popular kid in school by changing their gender. Because they know that it's a place to find protection and safety and an identity. And were they actually experiencing that? I don't know. You know, is it really gender dysphoria? I don't know. But I do know now that the world of transgender is far bigger than those who actually experience gender dysphoria.
Hi, I'm Jack Hamilton. He who controls the language controls the debate. So it's time to start going back and forcing honest, straightforward English, proper meanings of words to solve this problem.
Amen. Run for school board.
More questions?
Two questions. My name is Rob Marotti. My first question is, I used to be PTA president of Belfair Elementary. A child is not allowed to play sports or go on a field trip without parent consent. Now they're bringing them to get abortions. I don't understand that. My second is, once the guy in D.C. gets this thing passed, what's next?
What do you mean by that? What's the guy in D.C.?
The guy that got the gay rights thing.
Oh, the Human Rights Campaign.
Yeah, that guy. Once he gets this thing up and going and everyone votes for it. And
Well, it's going to be a while. They've been trying for decades.
Well, what's he going to go for next? Is it pedophilia? Is it
Well,
marrying your daughter?
sure. No, I think age is a very arbitrary. I can make the argument very easily that there's some very mature 14-year-olds, and it's really arbitrary to tell those 14-year-olds that they're not capable of love. And especially now that you have the mayor of Seattle, who is in his own. I mean, it might happen very soon. I mean, yeah. So but again, there's no end to human depravity. There is no end, and that's a theological conviction. It's not my idea; it's God's idea. But there is no idea. There is no end to that. You're right. We're never going to get to the point where we've reached the bottom. There is always a lower place to go, and that's where other kin and.
Johnny ever wants to marry a Saint Bernard? It's going to be okay.
Well, I'm not saying that's going to be okay immediately, but I don't know that that's the next one. I think age is much more. I think age is much more likely. Yeah, I think this is clearly a theme in all of this is it's a war on boundaries of any kind. That people want to be able to do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it, and we want to be able to do so in a judgment-free environment. So, and there are plenty of other things that people are judging.
By the way, I think I need a safe place because my name is Johnny, and I just say that. No, any more questions, please, tonight? Anybody want to come up? Is there anybody that? There we go. We have one more. And if there's anybody that is a little stiff in the knees right now and wants me to bring the microphone, I'll do that as well.
I am assuming, and I'm asking. I know when my daughter went through high school, there was a program that I totally objected to as a Christian parent, and I opted her out. Is this still an availability with this flash curriculum?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, you just have to go through the work of finding out and doing.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Rick Coons, and do you have any information on your interview over at Seattle Green? Do you have any more global information on just how the younger adults, or millennials, or what age group we're talking about, how many have totally accepted that?
Well, when I talked to 12 kids, and I think there's 9 of them on that video. So.
But now, if we talk about the United States, are we saying that out of the millennials, is there any studies that have been done? Or is that not quite there?
No, what percentage of millennials believe your anatomy has something to do with your gender?
Or if they've gone off to the whole.
Well, they have been. I haven't seen the study, so I can't answer that question specifically. Anecdotally, it's depressing. I mean, they have been so thoroughly catechized in this stuff. The degree of emphasis that that is happening on the university campuses and in high schools is ridiculous. You might not be able to write a complete sentence or define what a noun is, but you will know that gender is a spectrum, and it's much more important what your gender identity is.
Let's turn the lights up so they don't. I'm starting to freak out. I thought I was going to fail.
Any seizures happening in the room? No?
Yeah, the rapture was coming. Okay. We have time for one more question and then we'll move on. Yes, sir?
My name is Shane. And with the lack of a point of reference for the homosexual and trans society, typically or constitutionally, what would be your favorite argument to show that traditional family is better than the homosexual and trans?
Yeah, you ever hear the question? What's your best argument as to why the traditional family is, there's not a simple way to answer that. I think, I appeal to like natural law. And the idea that every kid deserves an opportunity to have their mother and father in their lives is an argument that most people have a hard time disagreeing with. And it's more true now because of how many people actually have lived the experience of not having usually their dad around. And when you tell somebody that, yeah, parents are individually not important just as long as they have adults who, care about them, and you tell that to every kid whose dad walked out on them when they were a kid, they're like, you're crazy, man. Because they spent their whole life missing their dad or their mom. And so I think people's own experience of pain testifies to the fact that moms and dads are uniquely and individually important. But the argument that we are, that we're dealing with is not really an argument, it's an emotion. Is this feeling of I want to be able, I'm not willing to accept the implications of the fact that I can't do whatever I want. And there's certainly a spiritual dynamic and component to that, and there's a lot of policy implications. But we can remain very confident that we are not going to get to a point 100 years from now where history looks back and realizes, oh, that was the moment when humanity discovered that gender doesn't matter, and you can marry whoever you want, and kids don't need their parents. There's zero chance of that happening. Zero chance. So the only question is, do we fly the flag of truth consistently and loudly enough that when people's own lives testify to the fact that what they're trying is broken, that there's some place to go and we can repair it sooner than later? But even if we all died immediately and there was nobody here to make the case, they would discover this in 15, 20, 30 years. Because the only possible outcome of believing you're smarter than God is pain. It's the only possible outcome. It's not because we're smarter or better looking or anything else. It's the only possible outcome because there are rules. They exist whether we want them to or not. The story of humanity since the Garden of Eden is believing that we're smarter than God, but we're not. And so we will discover that in this context as well as we have in every other. So we will win. Truth always wins, which is why I think we need to, make sure that we are not, we're not going to cower to the fact that there's people making the other argument. But truth always, always wins. It just sometimes takes longer than we'd like.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Joseph Backholm. And it's not because we ran out of this other really cool bling back there that you didn't look at, but we give our guests one of our mementos. You get like the first of the batch of new pins that you should show everybody at your office just so that they'll be jealous about it.
They will. They undoubtedly will. And remember, mace or petition, your choice on the way out. Mace or petition.
Or a check for $1 million.
Or a check for $1 million. That is your third option. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please drive safe. Be careful.